When Resident Evil 1 was released in 1996, the mysteries of the outbreak, the twisted experiments, and the origin of the monsters were all obscured in darkness. The mystery of the Spencer Mansion is what the players had to uncover. And that mystery, mixed with the general sense of venturing into the unknown, are a huge part of what made Resident Evil so great. And while there is a lot of blood and gore and overall violence, the game invites the player to enter the world of Resident Evil not with guns blazing, but as a detective. It presents us with a unique form of horror, a mystery horror, one that the player must piece together through various means in order to solve the mystery of just what happened at the Spencer Mansion. There are a number of subliminal things and plot distractions done deliberately by the developers in order to mislead players to keep them in the dark about the truth to the mystery. The horror of Resident Evil 1 lies in its ability to immerse players in the unknown, to make them question what happened within those mansion walls, the atmosphere, the meticulously designed puzzles, the haunting enemies. They all work in harmony to create an experience that feels like delving into the secrets of a cult, or like uncovering an ancient evil. And the way the developers crafted such a fantastic mystery horror is by planting subliminal seeds of fear early on in the game, and also with misleading players with subtle plot distractions. And before we take a look at some of those examples, most of the clips in this video are going to be from the Resident Evil remake from 2002. Because it's a superior game to the 1996 version, and many of the additional things added to the game, such as more environments like the graveyard out back, those were actually planned to be in the 1996 version, but had to be cut due to time constraints. So this is almost like the actual vision the developers originally had for the game. I'll still use a lot of clips from the 1996 version too, but anyway, just like the STARS members do detective work in-game to solve the mystery, we are going to do some detective work and piece together just how the developers crafted the mystery, because the inner game design is still there, and we can inspect the deliberate choices made by the developers to skillfully guide players into the depths of the unknown. So let's rewind time for a moment. Forget everything you know about this series, and let's go back to the origins of the survival horror, and try and rediscover this mystery. Back to when the game that birthed an entire genre was just released. Let us open the door to the unknown, and analyze a game played by those who dared to confront their darkest fears.
Resident Evil.
The setup is quite scary and does a good job of capturing the player's attention and imagination of what's to come. Right from the start, you are told the Arklay Mountains is where people have recently been found cannibalized.
Bizarre murder cases have recently occurred in Raccoon City. There are outlandish reports of families being attacked by a group of about 10 people. Victims were apparently eaten. The Bravo team was sent in to investigate, but we lost contact.
Look, Chris.
Spencer Mansion is located in the Arklay Mountains, so a giant mansion alone in the woods, on the mountains, sounds pretty cultish. Add in the reports of the cannibals, and it's easy to think, especially as a first-time player, that something supernatural is going to go down. Perhaps the people who were eaten were part of some sort of ritual involving human sacrifice and the consumption of flesh. And you gotta love the live-action 1996 intro. It is what it is, it's pretty cheesy now, but one thing you gotta keep in mind is, in 1996, although games did have blood and violence and stuff, there wasn't like this level of blood with like a live-action cast. So this was pretty shocking, to say the least, for younger people playing the game back then. I love the moment the guy picks up the gun and the hand is still attached to it, and just the shocked look on his face. And in the 1996 version, you get this really cool final scene. Here you see the mansion for the first time, the exterior, and the camera's zooming into it like you're running up to it, followed by this demon zombie dog growling at the camera. It's almost like it's foreshadowing or saying, hey, these guys are going into the mansion and here's what waits for them. Or it's like it's saying the mansion itself is an evil creature that's going to tear them all to shreds. And the developers really went all in on trying to sell the player on the evil cult theme. And this is part of what makes the mystery and the sense of discovery so good, because everything is not as it seems in this evil place. The interior is the opposite of where one imagines a team of researchers and scientists would work at. A huge mansion covered in fine decor. In the mansion you find many symbols, paintings, sculptures, statues, and other artwork depicting mysticism and strange, otherworldly motifs. But this esoteric, mystical, occult theme going on is all part of the distraction to subvert the player away from the truth, but it's done so in a tasteful way, and in a almost evil way, in that a lot of these pieces and the descriptions of them try to lead you down the wrong path in your investigation. In the main hall of the mansion, you can see this painting here that shows people standing around a grave praying like they're at a funeral. And where the grave is on the painting is actually a door, and the door leads to the graveyard. It's a nice touch. The way the people in the painting are looking down at the grave, it's like saying this is your grave, and to step through this door is to go to your coffin, to your death. And speaking of the paintings inside the mansion, here's something pretty interesting. If you've seen my other video on Resident Evil 4 called The Hidden Secrets in the Paintings of Resident Evil 4 Remake, I spend a lot of time talking about this painting. And while I was playing through Resident Evil 1 again to get clips for this video, I stumbled upon this painting here. And while they're not the same painting, they are extremely similar, and clearly this one was the influence for the Resident Evil 4 remake painting, which I believe was created a little bit differently to give the meanings I talked about in that video. So go and check that one out if you haven't already. And you know, there is a ton of things from the Resident Evil 1 remake that influenced or are referenced again in later Resident Evil games. Like a lot. Maybe there'll be another video for another time. Anyway, that was a little bit off subject. I just thought it was pretty neat. So let's continue our investigation. And you come across just so much mystical looking and occult themed artwork. It all lends to the feeling that something supernatural has taken place here. Like some sort of cult was using this mansion for their activities and something went terribly wrong, turning the followers into these undead monsters. And with its many doors and weird hallways, hidden rooms, bizarre artwork, it makes the player feel like they're in a place where some dark magic has taken place. You get these dimly lit corridors with lightning flashes revealing shadows of zombies waiting right outside the windows, spooky noises, creaking floorboards, doorknobs breaking apart as you go to turn them. It all feels like something straight from a ghost story. But the clues and information you uncover don't seem to suggest any supernatural force is to blame, but instead, it starts to look like science is to blame. It creates this uneasy contrast between the environment the player is in and the mystery they are investigating. It really drives the sense of the player uncovering a real mystery, but also builds the suspense and dread. There is always a feeling that something isn't quite right, that there is something always lurking around the next corner, just out of your sight. You really don't know what's going to be behind that next door. Early on in the game, you find this note, written by someone who resided in the mansion. And at first glance, it looks pretty simple, almost like a tutorial note to just explain how to kill the zombies for good so they don't rise up again. But I think this note is really interesting and it really reveals a lot. The note was written by someone residing in the mansion, but it doesn't really sound like a note that would be written by someone who resides in the mansion, right? And he refers to the zombies as, quote, beings, and says they may appear to be dead, but in fact they are able to come back to life. And this is interesting that he calls the zombies beings, as if they're some otherworldly creature, and talks about them coming back to life, because life after death is like a spiritual and religious sounding thing. And as a player who's just had to kill a few of these beings, and reading that they're dead and have come back to life, and can come back to life again even after you've just killed them, it starts to bring to mind like images of demons possessing corpses, or like the Evil Dead and things like that. The next part of the note I think is more interesting and a little bit more subliminal by the developers. They say, currently there are 2 known methods to cease the resurrection. 1, incineration. 2, destruction of the head. Isn't it interesting that the first thing mentioned here is burning, and the second way is destruction of the head, or shooting them in the head? You would think it would be the other way around, right? Burning a zombie seems like it'd be an awful lot of work compared to just a gunshot to the head. However, fire and burning is a lot more ethereal sounding than destroying the head. I mean, fire has long been associated with like purification and destruction, so using it as a means to permanently kill the undead, it adds like this layer of symbolism to like the gameplay. Because when you set fire to a zombie, you're purifying this evil undead thing. So having the burning before the destruction of the head, I think it's a subliminal and deliberate plot distraction, leading players to initially focus on this unconventional method of killing a zombie. Even in-game, if the player wants to burn the body of a zombie, the zombie must already be in a down state. So even mechanic-wise, you must shoot first, then burn the body second. I mean, if the note had said something like, "Dear fellow researchers, we have concluded the best way to stop all locomotives and those infected is 1. Use fire on the epidermis, reducing the subject to ash. Additionally, another option is to destroy the forebrain, preferably the telencephalon." Then players might start catching on to the truth, you know? They might start realizing, maybe scientists were fucking around with something here. Even the science equipment you find early on inside the mansion fit with the evil occult theme. For example, the butterfly room. This room is a hint to the player of the true nature of the Spencer mansion. But if you don't already know that Umbrella and the T-virus is the cause of everything, then it just looks like a room where some sort of occult science was taking place. Like, this looks like an area where people did alchemy rather than science. And it really plays into the horror of the unknown. Here's another example of some occult-looking science stuff. The exterior of the mansion has just as much, if not more, occult-themed related aesthetics. Out on the balcony, you can inspect this stained glass window that reads, "A stained glass window. The center resembles a witch." Witches are a supernatural being that control magic and sorcery and shit. So just the designers using the word witch here, very subliminally, leads your mind away from the truth of the mansion. And it just adds that little bit, just that extra layer to that sense of venturing into the unknown. And keeping in line with the cult theme, once again, outside the mansion you can stumble upon a small cabin, which brings to mind like a cult-like evil commune type thing. And it's where Lisa Trevor's been living, I believe. But it's where the player first encounters Lisa Trevor. And if you don't know, here's a short version of her backstory. At 14 years old, she was infected with the progenitor virus. When researchers saw her body reacted positively to it, they used her as a guinea pig for like the next 20 years. And at one point she was even infected with a parasite by William Birkin for research. Then once they realized she was clearly becoming too strong for them to handle, she was supposed to be executed. However, clearly she lived. When you first encounter her, it's in this little cabin. And when you first see her, she's wearing the faces of multiple people. They were the faces of female Umbrella researchers who she thought was her mother. And when she realized they weren't her mother, she decided to take their evil faces away. So yeah, at first, she definitely doesn't seem like she was a product of science, that's for sure. But alas, the truth is, she was. The puzzles found throughout the mansion are quite unconventional and have esoteric designs, yet these puzzles, while very mystic and occult themed, serve to highlight the history of the mansion and its secrets. And as you progress into the game, solving more puzzles, which leads to more exploration, the truth of the story is slowly revealed to you, and you get little bits and pieces of narrative in each puzzle, and the player must put the fragments together to reveal just what happened in the mansion. The focus on solving puzzles, while really popular at the time of PlayStation 1 era games, really fits the overall theme of Resident Evil 1. You are a member of an advanced police force. That means part, if not most of the job, would involve doing detective work. So these puzzles can just feel like you are a detective at work putting together the clues. And when you inspect something, you may get an item to help solve a puzzle, or you may get some creepy piece of information, but both are used by the player to solve the overall mystery. And I really like how in the original 1996 Resident Evil, when you inspect things sometimes, like on the ground, Jill would kneel down, like it looks like she's a detective, like really examining something. I don't know, it just looked really cool. It was a nice detail. However, puzzles in older games can be quite frustrating and can feel very dated. However, I don't think that's the case with Resident Evil 1. I think the puzzles are pretty fair. They do require the player to actually use their brain for some of them, and you do have to use your map, and you do have to plot out where to go and what to do. And once again, some of the puzzles are designed in such a way that makes sense in the environment you're in currently, but don't give away a whole lot of the overall story. They do a good job of slowly trickling information, letting the player gradually uncover the mystery, and as you explore deeper into the mansion, the player continues to uncover more puzzles, and the puzzles start to become more science and technology themed as you get closer to the truth. And as you solve them, more of the story is told to you, more of the mystery is revealed, until eventually it all comes together and it begins to look like the entire Spencer Mansion was just one giant puzzle waiting for the player to solve it.
Someone is a traitor. Umbrella set us up.
Enrico!
And while this isn't actually a puzzle, if your detective skills are sharp, you can figure out who the bad guy is before the reveal. Enrico reveals there's a traitor, and then he's suddenly shot and killed. But earlier in the game, you stumble upon Wesker, who is shooting his gun. And if you listen closely, you can tell it's Wesker's gun that fired.
So you're safe. Set us up.
Wesker.
Jill, so you're safe.
The zombies and monsters draw a lot of parallels to demons and demonic possession. I discuss this more in my video titled Resident Evil and the Nature of Evil, so check it out if you haven't seen it already. But over time, the infected individuals lose more and more of their free will until they become a full-blown zombie. And if the regular zombies are not burned, or if the player didn't land a head-exploding crit, they will eventually turn into a crimson head. And this draws parallel to the demonic possession, as the person already possessed slowly over time becomes less human and more demon, or in this case, less human and more zombie. And if you didn't know this, the liquor is actually just a mutated regular T-virus zombie. And it's thought that the Crimson Heads are a stage in the mutation between zombie and liquor. Besides biting the fuck out of the player, the regular zombies will also attempt to puke some sort of acidic acid onto the player, which is really creepy and looks really cool. Sounds disgusting too, and it looks disgusting, but it's a really cool concept. I don't think I really see much puking zombies like this in other zombie media. We come across T-virus infected dogs, which immediately look like some sort of dog that one would see in hell or something. They almost look demonic. And also, in my opinion, the dogs jumping through the window is one of the greatest jump scares of all time. We also have snakes and a giant snake. Snakes are very mystical creatures, often portrayed as evil beings. And one of the characters, Richard, after being bit by the snake, tells Chris that this place is full of demons.
Chris Redfield, Alpha Team. We're here to rescue you. Richard, what the hell happened to you? Chris, this place... Get your team out of here. Demons everywhere.
Once again, the developers are planting a seed in your mind that there is something supernatural going on here. There's also giant spiders, and these are actually evil and should never exist. Fuck them and fuck spiders. We also have the infected crows, and this enemy is pretty weird because while all the other creatures that are infected with the T-virus seem really angry and violent, the crows will just chill and they will not attack the player unless threatened. Also, all the crows here are just chilling in front of this dead raven in a cage, and I wonder if it's a mistranslation and it's actually supposed to be a dead crow in the cage. Like, do the birds that are looking upon this dead bird, do they know that they are dead and brought back to life, or does it mean something else? I'm not sure. There's also the T-virus infected shark. By the time you come across the giant shark, you are starting to discover the secret lab underneath the mansion. And this enemy is also the least supernatural looking and works well that the player is already uncovering the truth when they come across these. So there's no point in really keeping up with the evil cult theme anymore as they transition to the more science and underground research-based theme. And I imagine it was intentional to have the sharks, which have no similarities to some otherworldly creature, be used right as the player is really getting into the secret lab. Naturally, as the series progressed, the mystery aspect took a back seat, giving way to more action-oriented gameplay and clearer explanations. While later Resident Evil games continued to provide thrilling experiences, that initial sense of unknown horror and mystery has become a rarity in the series. I often feel like the developers in the later games don't really try to plant that seed of fear and horror, nor do they really have that sense of mystery and actively try to mislead the player as the player is searching for the truth. Resident Evil 7 is one of the only other Resident Evil games that really does this well. Anyway, that concludes my video on Resident Evil's hidden horrors and plot distractions. I hope you had fun, and thanks for watching.